everybody. Today's my baking day and I wanted to take you along with us. But first you can enjoy this sped up clip of me cleaning my baking space. See you soon. Good morning, everybody. Today is my baking day. Usually I do it on Thursdays, but since tomorrow is Thanksgiving, we're doing it today. So it's pretty convenient all around. And we're just going to hop right on into it. First, I am doing my weekly baking of bread. It makes about 6 loaves of bread, which takes us through most of the week. But I usually add in a little bit extra since it is Thanksgiving week. Of course, I'm adding in a little bit more. Let's adjust this light a little bit. There we go. Okay. My kids are playing downstairs, so there's going to be yelling. Welcome to a family of 7. I start with a 5-pound bag of flour. And I get all of the flour into my big mixing bowl. And then because I want to dust my pans with a little bit, I just remove just a small handful. Put it back in the bag for later. I save these flour bags so that I can wrap my bread in them. So now we are going to make a little hollow in the middle. Okay. Now, I learned this on a Depression era YouTube channel and it was great. I loved it. So I don't measure with spoons. So what I do is I take my hand, make a little cup. You get 2 small handfuls of yeast. 1. And I'll bring it closer to the camera so you can see 2. Okay. This is the instant yeast, but I don't think it really makes a difference. Maybe in some rise times it might. Then I get my salt. It gets 1 of those handfuls of salt. And then it gets 1 of the handfuls of sugar. Now in the original they didn't use salt or sugar, but I do find that it makes it a little bit tastier and rises better and everything else like that. So then we're going to put 6 cups of warm water in there. This is a 4-cup measure, but I added 1 more cup and then I have another little cup measure down here. The reason I do this bread first before any of my other baking is because it needs to rise. And while it's rising, I can be doing some other baking. After you've got that in there, you basically just start using either your hands or a spoon. Normally I use my hands, but for today I'm using the spoon because then I can handle the camera a little bit better. And you just stir it in until it's a nice thick dough. And you're going to rise. It takes about an hour to rise, especially if your kitchen is nice and warm from other baking that you're going to be doing. Today my son already started the baking by doing some chocolate chip orange muffins, and I made some banana muffins to fill up our 2 dozen muffin pan. So it's just coming together nicely. Now if you live in a humid climate, you might need a little bit less water. If you live in a really dry climate, you might need a little more water. About a cup in either direction, but usually 6 cups does it just perfectly and forms a really perfect dough. My husband's going to come over and show you the muffins and stuff. There you go. He's pretty proud of the things that we do around here. Now that I've got it mostly combined, I am going to get my hands in there. I'm wearing my apron today. Usually I just wear whatever I want to. I'm still wearing my Christmas pajamas. Make an appearance there?
Not trying to.
I might be able to trim it out either way. Showing your butt's a good way to get likes on Instagram.
Oh. In that case.
Don't you dare. So now I'm going to just start working it with my hands a little bit. I may try to speed this part up. After it comes together as a nice dough, it's still kind of sticky, and that's okay. What I do is I put a little oil or fat or tallow or butter, anything to make it help it not stick to the pan or the pot while you are bowl. It's not a pan, it's not a pot, it's a bowl. Not stick to the bowl while it is rising. I happen to have some vegetable oil from the muffins earlier, so I just put a splash on. And then I use my hands to kind of rub it all over. And then turn it over and rub it on the other side too. And then I have a trick to kind of coat the bowl too. I just roll it around like it's a big basketball. Coats it just enough that it's not going to stick terribly when it rises. This is a clean towel. It's just dyed pink from some washcloths. All right. And then you set it aside and let it rise for about an hour and you get started on the next thing. So I'm going to wash my hands and get started on the next thing. I'm all set up to show you my second recipe. So today, being that tomorrow is Thanksgiving, I'm doing a separate batch of rolls. Now normally if we wanted rolls, I would just use some from my own batch. But my husband has like a favorite roll recipe that his mom used to make, and this is really close to it. It's probably the same one. I go ahead and I use the Betty Crocker cookbook, and it's just the recipe for dinner rolls. So I'll just go ahead and get started. I've got 3.5 cups of flour in my bowl already, because you don't need to watch me measure that out. Next it calls for 1/4 cup of sugar, so a lot more sugar than what's in like regular bread. Right down. And then it calls for 1/4 cup of butter. And I have homemade butter. I make it from the cream that I buy at the store. Eventually I'll have my own cow and I'll make it from the cream from my cow. But right now I live on 1/8 of an acre. And that's not enough for a cow. So homemade butter there. And I'm just using the same spatula that I used to mix up my other bread dough. So that's one thing about doing bake days instead of a little bit at a time, is it saves on dishes. Because you can just keep using the same ones for similar things, and maybe a quick rinse is all you need, but this just has some yeast dough on it, so I'm making more yeast dough. Next it calls for a teaspoon of salt, and I have it all measured out here, teaspoon of salt. A package of regular or yeast, quick yeast, and that's 2 1/4 teaspoons, so I'll go ahead and measure that now. 1, 2, and a little bit more is 1/4. You'll notice that that's almost the same amount that's in a whole entire recipe of the 6 loaves. And I find that I like the 6 loaf recipe because it uses less yeast and it's more economical. Because sometimes yeast is hard to find nowadays. Anyway. Back to this. After the yeast, it calls for 1/2 cup of very warm water and 1/2 cup of very warm milk. So, of course, I went ahead and mixed it together. Dun, 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 dun. And 1 large egg. We have our own chickens. I know this was laid yesterday, but I'm still going to crack it into a different container because you just never know. So, yeah, we have 11 chickens, and it's an off season right now, or not off season. It's a season where they're molting. So they're not laying a whole lot of eggs, but 1 egg we can do. So 1 egg into here, and then you just mix it just like any other bread dough. And like I said, I use the spatula because I'm gonna be handling the camera, and I don't want my phone to get all gooey and covered. And I'll probably speed this part up too. So now I'll start kneading with my hands to get it all nice consistency. With the butter, this is sorry, my bowls do that sometimes. The bottom is kind of indented one way or the other, and if I push too hard, then it pops back out. Anyway, so you'll find the consistency of this is much more smooth than the recipe for the 6 loaves. And that is because of the butter that's in it. There is no oil in the other recipe, except for what you use to keep it from sticking to the bowl. But in this one, there is. And there's also egg, so it adds a little bit more fat. That will make it more, I've heard it said that American bread is more of a cake than a bread. Originally, bread was just what you could throw together with your grains and wild yeast and things like that. But American bread adds so much sugar, remember we had 1/4 of a cup, and rich things like butter and eggs, that it's more of a cake than it is a bread. That said, this is a very lovely dough to work with. My husband's going to be really happy that I made him his rolls for Thanksgiving. There is nothing more that this man loves than rolls. And in the absence of his lovely mom, I'm doing the best I can. So, same as the other one, cover it and set it aside. And I'll bring you back when it's time for my next recipe. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is making some pies, but I need to start by getting my canned cherries and turning it into pie filling. I canned it without turning it into pie filling because I wanted it to be more useful in different applications, but they're very liquidy, and so I'm going to be cooking it with a little bit of cornstarch just to thicken it up, and then I'll come back and show you what I'm doing next. So I'm going to show you real quick. What I do is I reserve a little bit of the cherry liquid. Sorry, the light keeps flashing. Okay, so I reserve a little bit of the cherry liquid and just stir my cornstarch into that, and then I heat the rest of it up, and then I'll pour this in, and then that's how you thicken it. So, welcome back, guys. So now I'm going to be working on my pies. I'm going to make 2 regular pies, and then later I'm going to make a pumpkin pie that has no crust. It's called an Impossibly Easy Pumpkin Pie. But for now, we're going to do this. Now, I'm going to let you know, I'm not a pie crust person. First of all, I don't like to eat pie crust, but my family does. And so without me liking to eat it, I also don't like to make it. So I'm busy enough. I buy my pie crust. This is the Pillsbury kind, but I found the Aldi kind works just fine. Any other kind that you want. So these are 2 crust pies. Now, I have noticed that if you go ahead and put fat and then flour down, it does work a little bit better. So I'll go ahead and show you on that, and then when I'm doing my bread pans, I'll skip doing that, so you'll be able to see how I do it now. Now I use a paper towel and whatever fat I have. Butter works fine. Vegetable oil works decently. Crisco, I think, is the best, but I don't use Crisco that often. Instead, I have either lard or beef tallow that I have rendered myself. So I just get a little bit on the napkin, go around the bottom and sides, and then I use the same napkin on the next one. And actually, my mom taught me this when I was a kid. She didn't do a whole lot of baking and stuff, but this I did learn. And I'll probably save this because I'm going to be doing my bread pans the same way. Go ahead and grab a little dusting of flour and just pop it in the bottom of one of the pans, and then tap it until it goes all the way around. and on the sides too. And I do it over my other pan so that when I'm done, okay, this might be noisy on the video. I can just pop it in there and dust this side. Sometimes you might need a little extra flour, but I think I've got it just about perfect. Ta-da! Now it just helps the pie crust not stick to the pie pan. You gotta unroll these delicately. But it's so much easier than making your own, so I still stick with it. And it tastes fine. My grandma's pie crust can't be beat, and she didn't leave a recipe, so why compete? So just press it down. Use the pan, trim out the edges. And repeat on the other one. I might try to speed this one up. Okay, so they're all pressed in, and now we're going to put our fillings in. I've got my cherry pie filling that I'll go grab first. This has been thickened from the 2-pint jars that I had earlier. I'll use my spatula to dig it out. And there's probably a little bit more than one pie's worth, but we'll see. It might fit just right. There's nothing wrong with an over full pie too. Just means extra goodness to share. I'll spread it out. We harvested these cherries this year from a friend's farm. She didn't have time, and we were very happy to come and pick for her, and then I gave her a couple jars in return. And I got, I think, 9 jars or so out of her small tree. So this is the fruits of my labor and somebody else's. So, and then we'll come around and put the top crust on in a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and move over to the apple. I reuse jar lids. The easiest way to get a jar lid off without harming it. Let's see if I can come kind of closer. Easiest way to do it so that it's going to work well. Let's see if I can adjust the light. Well, you get what you get, I guess. Okay, so the edges of the thing comes close to the lid, and where it's closest, you're going to stick the handle of a utensil, and then you're just going to pry it that way. It takes a very nice suction. I'll make a kid get that later. So here's my apple pie filling. This one's already thickened, so I don't have to worry about that. This one was a recipe from Three Rivers Homestead, I think, if I remember right. So these apples are either from our apple tree or a friend's apple tree. I didn't mark which apples were which when I jarred them up, but we have an apple tree that produced some apples, and then a friend had an apple tree that produced some apples, and she didn't want her apples, and it smells so good. So just spread it out. And this is why you do canning earlier in the year, so that you don't have to do it all. It's less work later. Okay, so quite simple. Get your pie crust and put it on top. And then we'll put some vent holes in it. So I'm going to do a little, just whatever crimp I want to do, I guess. And I think I remember my grandma going around the edges with a fork, so I'll probably do that too. Okay, taking your fork. I'm just going to use the one I used to mix up the cherries. Just press it down, make it look pretty. Okay, and now I'm going to put a few little vent holes in it. I'll just use my fork to make a little design. And this is a good time, if you do it in a design, then it might help you to cut your pie slices the right size too. So I'm going to do it in eighths. So I'll just kind of make little holes so that it's an easy way to cut, and then if I'm not the one cutting, then the person cutting knows how big to cut the pie slices. Now the next thing you don't want to skip, I never skip it. This is important to me. It's an egg wash. So I'll go get my brush and an egg and I come right back. We have chickens that lay brown eggs too, but most of our egg layers are leghorns, and they lay the white eggs that you would get in the regular grocery store, and they're very reliable layers. So we have a few.
Oh, sorry.
Say hi.
Hi.
I'm gonna leave that one in. So we're gonna do an egg wash. So we'll crack it into this little dish, and that's a good way to get the adrenaline running. Who needs a second cup of coffee when your husband can surprise you out the back door? So we're just gonna brush some egg wash onto the top of the pie, and what this does is it gives it a nice golden color. And if you are going to be adding like cinnamon or sugar to the top of a pie too, this helps to make it stick. Now I'm not going to do that on my cherry pie, but it does help make it nice and golden. So I'll finish brushing this all on, and then I'm going to put on the lid crust on the apple pie, and I'll do that off camera, and then I'll show you my next thing. So here's the cherry pie, and it's ready to hang out until I get the oven up and going. Okay, this is almost my last project for baking, although I do still have that impossibly easy pumpkin pie to make. So this is crackers. You may notice I have my pasta machine over here, and I use that because then I can get a nice even thickness on the crackers. So crackers, I decided to stop buying at the store because a lot of packaging, not very many crackers. My kids eat them so fast, like they think that they're a meal, but this way they see the work that goes into them, and sometimes they do help, and then they eat them more slowly and they're more conscious about it. And you can make any flavor you want. This is a very basic cracker recipe. I'll bring it up to the camera and then you can screenshot it. Starts with 3 cups of flour, and I already put it in the bowl, so you don't have to watch me measure that. 1 teaspoon of salt, I do think that salt's necessary in this. Yeah, you could probably leave it out, but I would not unless I was on a low sodium diet. A teaspoon of sugar. Again, it helps with the flavor. Otherwise, you're basically just eating cooked flour. Okay, so a teaspoon of sugar. Then it calls for a 1/4 cup of oil. I have used tallow and lard in this, and it works perfectly that way too. But right now I'm going to use vegetable oil because that's what I have on hand. I still need to render a bunch more tallow or lard. So gotta get caught up on that. And lastly, a cup of water. Doesn't seem to matter if it's warm, cold, lukewarm. It doesn't need to be ice water like pie crust, and it doesn't need to be hot. Just whatever. And then I'm going to use my spatula that I've been using for all of the other cooking things because it's all going to get baked. And yeah. Hi again, I had a little bit of camera trouble. So anyway, I'm mixing up my cracker dough. It's going to be pretty stiff, and that's fine. I'll have you know I deleted my Facebook app just so I could finish this video. I'll put it back when I'm done. Once the dough comes together, you're going to want to let it rest for a few minutes before you try sending it through the pasta machine. Now you can roll this out with just a rolling pin, but the thickness is really hard to achieve with just a rolling pin, and that's why I really do like the pasta roller for it. But you can absolutely roll it out thicker with a rolling pin, and you just will have to bake it a little bit longer. Now, I'm going to make this sesame seed flavored. I'm going to put sesame seeds in it. My husband just bought some toasted black sesame seeds the other day, and I think that sounds really good, and I think that'll go really good with our little boards that we're having tomorrow for Thanksgiving. So once it's almost together, I'll just add the sesame seeds in there. So this is what it looks like right now. A few crumbles coming off still, but I'll get the sesame seeds in there and then finish working it together. Just work those sesame seeds in. And I think my kids will really like this because it's interesting. It's not just a plain cracker. I've done them garlic flavored, I've done them thyme flavored, anything that you can add in small amounts. Any seasoning blends that you have, yep, those will work too. I've done cracked pepper. You just have to watch out for adding things that are too thick for the pasta machine or for your rolling pin to work around. Like I'm not going to be doing this quite as thick as I normally, or thin as I normally would because of the sesame seeds. I don't want to just crush them and turn it into a mess. Okay, so this is my dough. I'll bring it closer to the camera here in just a second. So you can see the cracker dough. Try and soak up a few more of the sesame seeds. So this is my cracker dough. You can see the consistency is a little bit like Play-Doh. So maybe not quite as easy to break off. So we're going to just let this rest, and then I'll come back and show you how to roll it out. So my crackers have had a chance to rest, and so now I'm just going to work them through the pasta roller. So let's see how well you can see it. I'm still working on how to manage my camera situation. Give it a quick mix just to get it soft again, and then you're going to want to break off a small piece at a time. Trust me when I say you don't want to try to send the whole thing through or even half of it or anything. Break off about the size of a dinner roll. Flatten it a little bit. And then if you're going to do the rolling pin, go ahead and skip this part. and just skip to the next part. But I'm going to show you how I do it with my pasta roller. So I've got my pasta roller here. It has a little bit of something left from last time, so hopefully that won't make a problem. Okay, there. Ignore that. Okay, so get your little piece and make sure it's on the biggest setting. Mine is a 7, and you're just going to slowly feed it through. You gotta go slow at first because you want to see if the dough is rested long enough for it to come out smoothly. So far, so good. And I just kind of guide it through. And now I may just stop at the level 7 this time, but we'll see if I can get it to. Sorry, that was just a clamp. Unfortunately, my table has a little bit of a bevel to it, so it's a little hard to clamp things to a table. But as long as I'm not going crazy, I should be able to hold it down just fine. Now that it's come all the way through, I'll show you what I've got. It's a little floppy. I'll come closer to the camera. So this is what I've got so far. You can absolutely do crackers this thickness, but I'm going to try to get it a little bit thinner. Now that it's gone through one time, I'm going to move it down to a 6. And I usually get it down to a 4. See, this is where the clamp comes in handy. So I may try to fix that here in the break. Moving it from the 7 to the 6 is much easier than starting it off at the 7. So that is one nice thing. It's made it through at the level 6. And because of the size of the seeds, I think I'm going to leave it there, right at a level 6. So that's going to make it a lot easier on me. I'll get fewer crackers, but they'll be thicker. So I'm going to lay these on my parchment paper lined cookie sheet that you can kind of see here at the bottom. And then I get a pizza cutter and I just cut them out. So I'll pause there and I'll roll all of this through, and then I'll show you when I do the pizza cutter to cut it out. So now I've got them laid out on the cookie sheets and baking sheets, and I'm just going to cut them into cracker sizes with my cutting tool. Pizza cutter, knife works too, and then I'm going to bake them. This is the first thing I've actually baked today, because I'm going to get the oven real hot, and it takes only 10 minutes or so. And then after that, I can drop it down for the other things like the pies that usually I start at a high temperature and then drop down. And then by that time, it'll be ready for the bread. While I'm waiting for the oven to preheat for my crackers, I'm going to get started on my impossibly easy pumpkin pie. Like I said, I don't really care for crust, but this one makes its own crust and makes it a lot easier. It uses Bisquick mix, but I use a substitute. Because I don't like to just buy things pre-made, I decide to just make my own mix, and I'll get to that when it comes to that ingredient. So first, it calls for 1 cup of canned pumpkin. So this is my own canned pumpkin. And honestly, it's probably closer to about 2 cups. But with the liquid all drained out, which I did try to do ahead of time, but there's a little bit left in there, it's closer to a cup, and it's close enough for us, and it'll just make a little extra. So you start with this. Dun, da, da, da. And then a half a cup of Bisquick mix. So my Bisquick mix is a half a cup of flour for this amount. Half a cup of flour, 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking powder, a pinch of salt, and a tablespoon of butter that I'll actually add here in a minute because it calls for more butter in the recipe. So dump that in. Half a cup of sugar, and this is a full cup, but I'm only using half. 1 cup of evaporated milk. So evaporated milk is nice, but if you do not have evaporated milk, you can use regular milk. So I'm going to get my can opener, get this open. So you poke the pour spout, and then you poke a hole in the back so that it has a way to get the air out. And then that's it. Now, it says only a cup, and this is 12 ounces. So I'll go ahead and use the same cup that I was using for my sugar earlier. And you know what? I'm going to prove myself wrong. It's not easy enough to pour, so I'll just open the whole thing. Back in the day, my grandparents always had one of those little triangle-shaped openers stuck on their fridge, and that's what they used for cans like this, where you just needed the liquid and not solids. I don't have one of those. I have regular can opener. So here we go. Add your cup of evaporated milk. Regular milk will work just fine too. And then, so I've got your evaporated milk in there, and the next thing that it calls for is a tablespoon of butter. Because I need a little bit more because of my substitute, my mix, I just get a glob that looks like about a tablespoon and a half of butter. Tablespoon and a half of butter, and then it calls for pumpkin pie spice, which I'm fresh out, so I went ahead and made my mix of cinnamon, cloves, nutmegs, and ginger. There you go. Last part is vanilla and 2 large eggs. I never measure my vanilla with a spoon, I measure it with my heart. Alright, 2 large eggs. I'm going to go out, since I have all my ingredients in here, I'm going to crack it into a separate container because these are farm fresh eggs. And I like to leave them on the counter. They are food safe because they're farm fresh. Here's one. I'll tell you what, the first time you crack open a bad egg is the last time you want to crack open a bad egg into your food. 2 eggs. And then you just mix it up and you pour it into a pie pan. I have a square pie pan this time. And that is as easy as it gets as far as pumpkin pie goes. So I just mix it nice and thoroughly and we'll pour it into a pie, and there you go. The directions say to bake at 425 for 15 minutes and then reduce it. So that's why I'm doing my crackers in the oven first, which I'm about to put them in there, before I start my pies, because most pies they want you to start it at a high temp and then drop it. So I'll go ahead and mix this up and get it into pie pan. And I'm not even going to bother greasing and flouring that pie pan because there's enough fat and flour in this that it won't be too sticky. While my crackers are baking, I'm going to work on the rolls. So they've doubled up. Stand by, please. And so we just knead them down. My kids have one of our friends over and she's hanging out with them a little bit. So just knead it up, and then we're gonna divide it into rolls and put it in our baking pan. Now, a lot of people like to divide it into 12. I like to divide it into 14 because I have 7 people in my family, and if there's only 12 rolls, then somebody's going to be left out.
Oh, so sweet.
So, now I just divide it in half, and then each of these is going to be 7. You know, I used to have a hard time with the math thing. So, here's what I do. I make it into a nice log, okay? I find the middle, and then I go just a little bit over to the side. So then, stay there, please. Go! So,
oh gosh, so no, that would be dangerous. That would be like,
there's Anthony.
That would be like
so we'll do 3 over here and then 4 over here.
So, your turn.
Anthony. Stay back. Go. So we've got, this will be 3 pieces, and then that'll be 4, and then 7 plus 7 is 14. Everybody just came upstairs, so it's going to be a little noisier. So I'll go ahead and pause this and come back to you when I have them all lined up, and I'll show you how they look. So here's the 14 rolls that we've got, and now I'm going to punch down the other bread. It's doubled in size, definitely. So I'll just bring it over here where you can see me. And got my bread pans all greased and floured and ready, 6 of them, and so now I just get to punch it down. This is the best part. So I punch it down and I work it back together. The top usually gets a little crusty, so you try to work that in. And then I'm just going to divide it into 6 different pieces, 6 even pieces, as even as I can get them, and form them into the loaves. I have not covered my rolls yet because I'm going to put egg washes on everything, and then I'm going to cover it. Okay, now you can cut it by hand or whatever, but I just use a butter knife. Sorry about the noise. Cut it into 6, kind of like a star shape. And it's just to help me to get the right amount. So even if it's not perfectly cut, it just helps. That's the timer for my crackers. So I'll have to go check that. So this helps you get 6 mostly even loaves. And you just pull one of these out. And form it into kind of an oblong, circle-y loaf thing. Tuck in the bottoms and stick it in here. Now I'm going to go check on the crackers before I continue. So one of the trays was done. My oven's hotter at the top than it is at the bottom. And so this is what my crackers look like when they come out of the oven. And yeah, I got the other ones just finishing up. And now we're going to go back to working on the bread. So here we are back at our bread. Just finishing dividing it up and putting it into the loaf pans. And what we're going to do is, after we've got them all in the loaf pans, we're going to use a knife, butter knife works. We're just going to run a quick split down the middle. It helps it to bake a little bit more evenly and more of a square instead of a peak. That kind of helps control where the crack is going to be, because your bread will probably crack one way or the other. You might as well have it be right in the middle. I got all these bread pans at secondhand stores. That way I didn't end up paying too much per pan. Because my goal here is to be more frugal. So it wouldn't make sense to invest a whole lot of money into the equipment just to save a few cents. So, plus, keeps things out of the dump, right? Now these will still need a second rise. The second rise will probably take about an hour or two, although now that I have the oven on for other things, it may go a little faster. The dough is a little bit sticky, but that's okay. It's supposed to be. One last loaf. And sometimes if I'm baking and I know that we're going to have hamburgers or hot dogs, I'll turn one of these or two of these into hamburgers or hot dog buns instead of loaves of bread, because it works just well. It's just as serviceable. And so now that I have them all in and split, I get to do an egg wash over all of them, including the rolls, because I like that shiny golden top. Same egg that I was using a little earlier on the pies.
Yeah.
And I'll just brush it off. The next thing to go in the oven is going to be the pies. And I'll put them all in at the same time and bake them at about 450 is what it's at right now. But I'll bake it at a high temperature and then I'll drop it down. And I'll come back and show you the rest here in a moment. So I've got the pies in the oven and the bread's going to go next. Right now the pies are baking at about 365 because I'm splitting the difference. And they'll be in there about 45 minutes. And then I'll drop it to 350 and put the bread in. And those will bake for about 35 minutes, sometimes 40, depending. And then all that's left after that is cleaning up. So I hope that you have enjoyed seeing all the things that I've made today, and I hope that, I hope it's been inspiring. Thanks for joining me on our baking day. I hope that it was fun for you and that you enjoyed it and that you learned something. Feel free to leave a comment if you have questions or comments. And find me on Instagram, Tracy's Homestead with an EY. And we'll see you next time. Bye.